It was nearly 7 years ago when I made a video showing how the Peckforton Light Railway fits into its garden setting, and so, since then I've made a few changes, I thought it would be worthwhile reshooting a similar video. The biggest change evident in this shot is that I have constructed a workshop in place of the ramshackle sheds which were in this corner of the garden. This view down the side of the garden remains very much unchanged, with the copper mine in the middle distance and Beeston Market Station in the background. In this view, from 2015, I was using the conservatory as a workshop, which worked reasonably well, but it did deprive the household of a comfortable garden room. Moving down the garden to Beeston Market Station, we see how the railway is linked to the storage sidings in the garage. The station layout itself hasn't changed a great deal, but I have landscaped the station forecourt and added coal staiths and a cattle dock. As we did in 2015, we will now follow a passenger train as it departs Beeston Market and makes its way down the line. We pass behind the engine shed, which has been widened slightly since 2015 to make better use of the space. We now pass by the copper mine, which in reality would be located at the far end of the railway. Placing it here allows me to swap trains of full skip wagons for empties via a hidden link. The line here is on a wooden trackbed, which was built into an existing hedge of laurel. I have planted Lonicera cuttings amongst the laurel, and, in good time, this will take over and replace it. The railway now wends its way past the compost bins to run alongside the boundary fence, behind a row of Leylandii plants. This section rarely appears in my videos as it's not particularly photogenic. The line now approaches the junction to Buckley Station, which is accessed across a swing bridge, modelled on that which crossed over the River Blythe on the Southwold Railway. The railway then passes behind the workshop. It reappears where the branch line to and from the copper mine diverges. This section has been completely remodelled since 2015 and, as you can see, the Leylandii hedge, which shields the workshop from view, is now being replaced by Lonicera. We cross over another junction, which, like the previous one to Buckley, doesn't really exist on the hypothetical railway. The line now skirts the hedge at the back of the garden. The trackbed here has been relaid since 2015 to iron out an unwanted dip. The shrubs have also been replaced as they outgrew their location and became very straggly. They are slowly becoming established, though the campanula in the foreground has become now quite rampant, presumably because the previous planting extracted too much moisture from the soil. Beeston Castle Station has been revamped since 2015. The coal yard on the left is new, and the castle ruins in the background have been greatly improved by hacking a couple of thermalite blocks about with a saw and a screwdriver. The new brewery building is just visible on the right. Here we see the same view as it was in 2015. The topology is much the same, but the detailing is very different. On the right, the old siding now serves the brewery, which was constructed from scribed Fomex board. Now, back to the present day and a burst of sunshine. In the foreground, you can see there is now a sand quarry siding with loading hoppers. This has added another source of traffic for the railway in keeping with the area. There was an extensive sand quarry at Beeston. I've just shifted it a few miles inland. The railway runs alongside the River Gowie, which does exist in the real location, but in reality is little more than a narrow brook. The planting here works very well, partly down to planning, but mostly down to luck. As you can see, mind your own business thrives in this shady, damp area. The line now swings out to provide a long sweeping loop around a small patio on its approach to Peckforton station. A new level crossing leads to the station, which has been enlarged a fair bit since 2015 to accommodate sidings for the sawmill, which has now been constructed. The interior of the sawmill has been detailed with circular saws and a horizontal steam engine, cannibalized from an Airfix beam engine kit. Going back to 2015, you can see that the station was much more compact and none of the sawmill buildings existed. Although it's not evident, the station trackwork has been raised a few inches to even out a gradient and help prevent rainwater from puddling in the station yard. Back then, as you can see, the viaduct was in the process of being constructed, with several hundred individual carved balsa blocks representing sandstone stonework. The viaduct has now weathered nicely into the landscape, though some of the stone blocks need a bit of touching up. As the track runs once more beside the river, we can see the new watermill, which existed only as a vague sketch in 2015. The river was widened here to provide a mill stream. This section is largely unaltered, though the foliage and undergrowth has grown up a bit since 2015. The track curves round on a real sandstone wall to pass close by Bickerton Station. Again, Modeller's license allows it to be situated here rather than 5 scale miles away. If we compare the last scene with this in 2015, you can see the foliage is much more dense beside the river and the site for the mill is barely visible. However, this next section looks very much then as it is now. Back to the present day, and a closer look at the sand quarry siding. The loading hoppers are foam board, while the embankment behind has been cast in concrete. Our train emerges from beneath the overbridge below Beeston Castle Station and commences its 1 in 40 climb up Gallantry Bank. The ground rises up from the house to the back of the garden, and so, whereas the sandstone wall supporting the railway is about 18 inches tall near the house, here it is less than 12 inches by the time the track reaches the summit. Having reached the summit, we are now approaching the crossover junction, which we saw earlier. The train takes it to run back over the same piece of track, only this time in the opposite direction. And so, it passes once more behind the workshop. When it emerges, it now takes the track across the swing bridge mentioned earlier. The swing bridge wouldn't really have been needed on my hypothetical railway, but is a convenient way of passing across the front of the workshop. Our train now arrives at Pewkley Station. Back in 2015, the most apparent difference is the enormous Leylandii hedge behind the station. As the train pulls out, we see the station yard and junction for the copper mine branch, as it appeared 7 years ago. Returning to the present, as you can see, the hedge has gone and there is now much more space in the station yard. In addition, in the background there is another siding, on which sits the Boneworks building, modelled on one which still exists as a museum in Stoke-on-Trent. We now start the descent of Gallantry Bank in the opposite direction. In the real location, the railway climbs up one side of Gallantry Bank and then descends the other side towards Bickerton Station. I've simply reused the same piece of track for both climb and descent. Of course, we are now going to pass by the sand quarry siding once more, but this time, rather than it being imaginary, it really is there, located just outside Bickerton Station. Back in 2015, the sand quarry simply didn't exist, and the train just coasted unimpeded into Bickerton Station. Bickerton Station. In the background, you can see the brewery building at Beeston Castle. Bickerton is presently undergoing some modifications. A new siding has been added to the left of the main platform to allow for more storage of freight stock, and as you can see, a 3D printed fence and scribed foam board stonework has been added to the back of the platform.